Welcome back for this month's Real Estate Roundtable, your all-in-one comprehensive view of what's happening across the real estate industry, straight from the industry's earliest technology adopters and foremost experts in technology, marketing, capital, and cybersecurity. As is always the case, this is a three-part show. First, introductions, what's happening in each of our respective sectors, followed by a deep dive in industry news and member shifts and sector shifts. Part 3, bear with me, we're just having some interference here from the storm. Part 3, what does it all mean for your real estate business? How to adjust and adapt over the next 30 days. I'm Andreas Senie, founder, CRECollaborative, brokerage owner, and a technology growth strategist for nonprofit and for-profit businesses. Joining me this month is, and I'm just going to give me 1 second to reset the audio here. Thank you. I would say cut to commercial, but we don't have commercials. It's one of the things our members love about us. Thank you for that. Joining us this month, Saul Klein, Realtor Emeritus, Futurist, strategist, trainer, and one of the founding members, Realtor.com, what was to become Realtor.com. Saul, nice to see you again. Is my audio picking up?
Yeah, you sound like you're in a closet, but I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, you guys sound better than me anyway. So now at least I have an excuse. Also joining us this month, Rebekah Carlson, CEO Carlson Integrated, past president of the United Car Association, and owner of her own brokerage there in Illinois, as well as Professor Darren Hayes, CEO, Code Detectives, top 10 forensic computer examiners, and a review editor, new position review editor at Frontiers in Big Data in Cybersecurity. Lastly, and certainly not least, Anna Maria, joining us from Inland Green Capital, over 20 years in property management, 25 years property management, portfolio of over 30 retail properties, 3.4 million, and 500 tenants. Welcome, everyone.
Hey. So good to be back, Andreas.
Thank you, Rebekah. Nice to see everyone. I'm going to let you guys lead for a moment, if you would. Rebekah, talk to us a little bit more about what's happening on your side of the business in the marketing world, and I'm going to reset my audio while you do that.
All right. Well, I just got back last week from ICSC. So I had a great show, and there were some takeaways that I thought I might share here because I'm sure some of our... Oh, Saul.
What's the acronym stand for?
Innovative Commerce Serving Communities. Whoa. I know. It took me a while to get it. So for many years, it was the International Council of Shopping Centers, and they've broadened their approach to make sure that we're including governmental agencies and municipalities, I think in some ways because of all of those things Saul has advised on in the past, right? Saul, you frequently talk about how important it is to follow the money, and the government supplies a lot of the money. So I think ICSC has understood that vein and the importance of that. And they were, it was a really great convention. So there was a ton of bustle in the halls. And I was trying to think of like one word I could have to capture what the convention was like. And what I came up with was traction. There's traction in the industry. And people have been talking about the challenges in retail for a long time. I see retail responding with evolution, which retail always has done. Retail has always evolved. I've talked to many people who are working in revitalizing major malls and re-tenanting, redeveloping, and really aggressive buyers from domestically and internationally who want to buy giant mall portfolios even and commence some really substantial redevelopment campaigns. I thought that was fascinating. So I don't know. Saul, have you ever been to ICSC?
No. But it sounds like a lot of fun, a lot of great information. And, and the shopping center thing has always been kind of fascinating, particularly now, right, with COVID and everything and people's habits. And, we have a big regional shopping center in downtown San Diego. So right in the middle of downtown on Broadway, Horton Plaza, this big shopping center. It was state of the art in its day, and it's abandoned. This is in the middle of downtown. It's been abandoned. The homeless folks have taken it over. And so in my mind, I'm listening to that. I'm going to be looking for, people coming in, maybe to reposition, maybe to bring back the old merchants that were there. I don't know, but that's great to hear, because I noticed that there's always traffic when I'm going down towards the major shopping centers, regional shopping centers in San Diego, that I can't believe all of the lineup of the traffic getting off the freeway, right? I don't go, right? But on my way, I can just see it, and I'm amazed. And I go to, you go under the overpasses, and you can see all this traffic, and it's like all going into the regional malls. So, amazing.
And I'm hopefully back in clear audio at this point. Thank you guys for that. If I may, speaking of traffic and where things are moving, not just in California, but the rapid rise in mortgage rates, what you pointed out just now, Saul, on repositioning, on investors coming in and picking up those assets. It's actually something I wanted to ask the group about. I mean, hotels, apartments, self-storage demand are all going up because the rental length is much shorter. You can adjust for this inflation. But at least here in the Northeast, what I've noticed is there's a lot of developments that have stalled that are now coming back on the market, fully approved sites, looking for new investors, looking for new partners. And I don't know if it's Raz, if I'm just seeing it because I'm here and I'm hyper-local and that's what I'm looking for from my investors, or if it's happening everywhere. You've got your shopping center that's already been taken over by you. And Becca, you were at ICSC. You've been for many years with your luncheon. What was the inventory like? What is the mood of people right there on the floor?
Very positive on the floor. So it was a smaller show, meaning there were only about 20,000 registrants. Typically, in the many years I've gone, and I've been in the industry for 19 years, and I have gone to ICSC, 17 of those 19 years, COVID being the only years that I haven't attended. And it's been as small as 10,000 on the when the crash happened for the recession to as large as 35,000. So there really is a big swing as far as numbers of attendees, but the sense of community and camaraderie was palpable. Everyone was very excited, and I spent a lot of time in the South Hall near a number of retailers. Their booths were packed. They had tons of interest. Everyone was smiling and happy because they were doing deals. And I just ran into a number of owners, developers, brokers. Everybody was really happy because they are doing deals. So those pieces are good, and I know it's so subjective because that's how I'm reading the room. But I do have a number of contacts, and everyone has come back saying that it was a great, great show.
Becca, where was it? And how many people were there?
So Las Vegas, and 20,000 registrants for the conference.
Great.
How many steps did you do? I did 10,000 last show I attended. I watched part of it and I went, oh my God, I'm exhausted. But that is exactly in line what you're saying about everyone being upbeat and positive, especially the retailers. I mean, Marcus and Millichap just came out with a study said there's a 27% increase in retail savings compared to last year, same period. So there's money there. We've all got savings and extra income, so to speak. Saul, you look like you've got a thought there, or you can't hear me. Either one.
That's it. I can't hear you. No, you're fuzzy. I can barely hear you.
Right.
But
so every month we touch on your car wash, and I've got to ask it again. How are things going there? Are people out in droves?
Because you've been asking me, and because I've been thinking about it more than I would normally think about it, I've actually starting to believe that maybe there are patterns here. And, people are creating indexes and trying to judge where things are going, volatility indexes, appreciation indexes. I think that the car wash index could possibly be, one of those pieces of data that fits into some other overall scheme of data that gives the hedge funds the extra leg that they need. So the car wash, and I mentioned this to you a little bit before we started, and that is, we've got the car wash, and we own this property that's got real estate in a business. And so a lot of people have that situation. So if you're in that situation, you own real estate and you own the business, there might be tax advantages to structuring the ownership in different ways. years ago, we structured the ownership in different ways. And so we also found that when we needed capital for either the business or the real estate, we could loan the money personally ourselves to entities. And so the owners of this business we all get 3 checks a month. We get 1 interest payment. We get 1 rent because one of the entities we owns the real estate, and we get 1 for the business of the car wash, 5-bay local car wash, vacuums. We've owned it since 1979. And so the last 2 months, and part of it is seasonal, but the last 2 months, that 3rd check didn't come in. Well, that's kind of bad. It tells me that not as many people are washing their cars. Maybe $5 is $5 a month to take it out of your budget. So and this is kind of a blue collar neighborhood. So, I think, as I start to think about this, there's value in this data. So the car wash business has slowed down. That means that people that live in at least this neighborhood aren't spending that money or not looking at it as something that's discretionary to them. And that might have some reflection on, and it'd be interesting to watch us, where we're really going. What's really happening with inflation? What's really happening with loan portfolios? What's really happening with the GSEs? What's really happening with Treasury? What's really happening with the Fed dumping assets back into the market? I mean, what's really going on? Are we getting too rosy a picture? Are we not looking at it seriously enough? And I think the car wash indicator is going to be something that we can count on.
Well, under all this data, as you've said many times, and that just might be the next index that nobody knew to watch. You can collect enough of it. I have a feeling that the car wash is a bit more analog than real estate in many aspects. Although your water bill will tell you how many gallons and what's going on. So we jest about it, but I love talking about your car wash because it's the simplest business that mirrors simple economics. Can they afford? Is there discretionary? Are they coming in? What can we do to do better? And the Fed's doing their part. I mean, inflation is hedging is to slow down the market, not kill it, just slow it down. And you're right. Depending on who I talk to, there's a lot of negative energy out there. But those aren't people I want to talk to that often. But it's scary, and what people are doing and how they're going about the next 6 months, 12 months. From those that I've found, everyone's positive for the next, in real estate anyways. For 6 months, we're okay. 2022 is going to continue to be a great year for those moving and those who have set themselves up to be in a place to jump in on these reposition opportunities for the institutional real estate companies that are out there with their DST products, securities products. They're still making moves, and there's positive outlook there. Darren, what about you over on the cybersecurity side? And congrats on that new position, which I did mention. I don't know if anybody heard it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great to be back here. Great to see everybody in good health. And just a quick point, when you were talking to Saul, I was just going to say, don't forget inflation is not always a good indicator because it's not including energy and Saul, I'm hearing $7-8 a gallon for gas, right?
Yeah,
is that correct?
Sure. That's $6.50 thereabouts. That's bad enough, right?
Oh yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Things, I just got back from a conference, Compliance Week. It was at the JW Marriott in Washington, D.C. There were some great speakers there from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The author of a very interesting book, Bad Blood, was one of the keynotes, John Carreyrou. Bad Blood is about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, if you remember that scandal involving that blood detection system that was fraudulent and that kind of thing. So, great talking to people and learning about the importance of compliance, ethics, facilitating whistleblowers. And this has become an even more important theme for the SEC recently, is, this idea of ethics and reporting and, that kind of thing. But I was on a panel talking about cybersecurity, and we were asked, those of us in cybersecurity, to talk to compliance people because the big fear out there is ransomware, the multi-million-dollar fines associated with the general GDPR in Europe, for example, if you suffer a network breach, or if you're sharing information of EU citizens with people you shouldn't be doing. but also talking about supply chain. So supply chain is a really, really hot topic at the moment, because a lot of these breaches are coming through one of your vendors, right? People who have credentials to access your system. It could be one of your cloud storage providers, for example. But a lot of kind of what we're talking about and what I was talking about was actually borne out in the latest data breach investigations report, which was just released by Verizon. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please do, because they've been doing this report for years, and it has so much credibility because it also involves and includes reporting from different agencies such as the U.S. Secret Service, who are at the forefront of financial crimes, especially credit card debt, credit card fraud, and also network intrusions. They do a lot of work in that area, but also involves Europol and law enforcement agencies all across the world. But so ransomware attacks are up in a very, very big way. Everybody's still talking about those. You've probably heard a little bit about credential stuffing. So credential stuffing is where people look at these data breaches, and people clean up all this information from these data breaches, and they repackage it and sell it on the dark web, sometimes on the regular web, so that you can, and you don't even need to test it out yourself. You can buy tools that will automate this process to try and get into different accounts using these stolen credentials. So if you have an iPhone, for example, and you get those alerts, your email was part of a data breach, go change your password. Don't ignore those. That's what credential stuffing is relying on, you not taking care of those alerts and doing the right thing. But just getting back to the supply chain, in this report also, they just mentioned that the majority of these intrusions are now happening through your supply chain and people getting access to your network that way. So this came up at the conference, that more and more we need to have a more holistic approach to security and not just develop cybersecurity planning for our own organization, but having our vendors and other people at the table there to talk about what their policies are, talk to their cybersecurity people, what their protocols are, and making sure that you have this bigger picture of your cybersecurity strategy rather than just being internal looking. And also the other thing that comes up again and again is that a lot of these data breaches are reported by somebody else outside the company. That's usually how it happens. We don't know that our company has been breached. Somebody else tells us.
So Darren, you said with the people that have networks or vendor networks, it's like the weakest link in the chain kind of thing, where
Sure.
Everybody gets burdened by the weakest link.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, we do use small businesses who may not have the same kind of resources for cybersecurity and may not have the same protocols as us. And sometimes, unfortunately, they can be the weak link into a big company. But that's not always the way. These managed service providers, those who give us the cloud storage, have tremendous resources in terms of security, but they can also, the bad guys know that if I get access to one cloud service provider, I've got the credentials for maybe 1,000 different companies. I now have access to all those networks. It's an easy way in.
Mm-hmm. They become the weak. They are the weak link in that case.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So did you learn some tactics, or did you guys talk about tactics for educating people in increasing their cybersecurity awareness at your conference? I know that's what you do anyway.
Sure, absolutely. I talk. A lot of companies are hesitant about involving law enforcement during or after a breach occurs. For example, they're afraid of being held liable, or damage, or they don't want the PR and that kind of thing. And I mentioned to people about how they should establish connections in the intel world, in law enforcement, so that they know who to call if a breach happens. And sometimes when you're picking a provider, it's really, really helpful to know who the people are who are running that company. Everybody wants to look at the functionality of a cybersecurity tool. Everybody wants to know who their customers are and talk to them, see if they're happy. But you got to go beyond that and see who's actually running the company. You know, are they competent? Are their staff qualified? Are their security people? They got good certifications, good training. What kind of churn rate? Because it's a big problem with cybersecurity and so much demand for positions is if there's an unhealthy culture there and a lot of churn, that can impact, you know, your support in terms of cybersecurity as well. But a lot of the talk at all these conferences is, you know, how there's a lack of people, and you know, and then the other thing is artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that's going to help us in the future, because we don't have the people. We're going to have to rely on this more and more, these automated responses and this artificial intelligence to react when we can't react fast enough.
You know, it's interesting because at least my whole life, we were brought up to think that we were going to overpopulate the world and that we couldn't have a lot of children, that it was irresponsible to have a lot of children because we're going to overpopulate the world. And China even instituted a policy where they didn't even let themselves replicate themselves. And here we've got these aging populations, and we're surprised that there's not as many people to actually work to support, or to, you know, the whole system, as you'd think we would have thought through it. But don't you? I mean, we thought we were starving the world. We just had too many people. We thought we were going to open up, and maybe we are, and maybe resources are not where they need to be. But seems like we can't find the people we need right now to fill the positions that are there to be filled.
Well, I think one of the, you know, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but this is just a theory that when I go to a lot of conferences today, especially security conferences, I was just at one yesterday, and I see, you know, 20, 30 security companies that I've never heard of before. And I keep seeing all these new security companies that are offering consulting services. And I'm thinking, these are people who worked internally for a company. Now they're setting up their own shop because they can make more money doing this. And so the companies can't have the internal staff that they need for their cybersecurity needs. So it seems like there's this big shift away from trying to do this internally to just hire consultants to run their security operations center, do all their incident response, and you know, that's one thing I mentioned as well in the panel is I said, you know, make sure you have people lined up who are going to work for you and consult for you when you have been breached, because in a pinch you're going to pay top dollar rather than having that contract in place where you know your fixed costs.
You know, and for small companies, you know, it's a matter of priorities, right? And it's a matter of spending the money. And again, if you're a small business and you haven't had something like this happen to you where it costs you a lot, you're going to prioritize, and you might not put data security or security as you know, where it should be. And you know, you might be one of the lucky ones, but you might not be.
Exactly.
Well, Darren, do you think that that's also a push towards entrepreneurship? Because I do know that entrepreneurship numbers dramatically increased during COVID. So the number of business buyers. I have a client who's a business broker, and their buyer pool just increased. He had been almost like a seller's broker before, but he almost transitioned to a buyer's broker because there was so much interest in people buying a job, buying a company, buying a business so they could have a new job. And I think we see that in all sorts of fields, but I wonder if that pushed that desire for entrepreneurship and to be your own boss. It's probably somewhat about money, but probably also about wanting to build your own business. And I think a younger generation likes it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is definitely pushing to pushing entrepreneurship. That is a big drive, but also it could know data on this, but just people wanting to work remotely and not go into the city or right. So I think that's a big driving force as well, and I'm seeing more and more people looking for cybersecurity people, but saying, don't worry, you don't have to come out here to our state. You can work remotely. You can go, you know, we won't make you fly anywhere or do anything.
You know, if that trend sticks, then that changes real estate use, and there's great conversations around that and around value. But did you hear the other day, Elon Musk? He says everybody that works for Tesla's coming back into the office. Did you see that?
Oh, I didn't see that.
He
No.
says if you want to stay home and do nothing at home, do it for another company.
Well, there's plenty of us that aren't doing nothing at home.
Well, no,
Need to be-
I'm just quoting Elon Musk. Right?
No, and it's a great quote. And Elon Musk is doing incredible things. If we're going to talk about where we're headed to work, let's talk about the space, going to space, and all the legislation they're now starting to talk about. Gentlemen handshakes aren't there. We can go far here. I love this topic, but I haven't spoken much, and I'm haphazardly coming back into it here. Darren, you did point out something interesting, and Saul and Becca. Becca, you pointed to entrepreneurship. Saul and Darren, you mentioned lack of educated workforce or skill or willing workforce. I think people have gotten used to being home, and there have been a lot of shifts in policies that really affect the masses. And at least from what I see, there are a lot of positions that need filling, that supposedly need filling, that just aren't happening. Just the other day, I had Darren, to your point, a cybersecurity firm call me trying to sell services, and I said, well, we're new. Who are you? We're brand new. We just split from so and so. Really? Because so and so's a big company, and I don't know who you are. What do you do in that instance? Same thing with these contractors, developers. There's a lot of upstart, which, Becca, to your statement, entrepreneurship, this transition to the new generation, that's a go generation. They don't stick around to build big companies. They're just hot potato positions. And that's where I fall in on those lines. The skilled force is there. It's just you can't get to it because they have no upward mobility or pathway, a career path that gives them the time they need in a bigger company to then be exposed to brokerages or real estate businesses like ours. I mean, Becca, you hired 5 new people 3 months ago, brand new, weren't even marketing, I believe. So hopefully I covered what I couldn't hear. I was reading your lips.
Yeah, I would just add one small thing to that. So one of the points I made was people who work in incident response, they get really well paid. And that doesn't, sometimes people have this feeling that, well, such and such is making 150, 200,000. He should be happy. He shouldn't be complaining. But I said the point that's really important here is that they're working 7 to 7, and they have to work at least one weekend, away from family, for incidents. I said they work very, very hard. And when you have like a company policy of no new hires and there's churn and people leaving, that policy really, really impacts those people down in incident response who really, really work very, very long hours. And if they don't like working there, they're going to move on. So it's not always a case of just, that they feel that they can always, hop around. It's a very, very tough lifestyle.
Employee experience. It
Yeah.
matters.
Yes.
It really matters.
So you just made me think of putting these 3 things together, and that the 3 words, more than 3 words. Entrepreneur. What is an entrepreneur really when we get down to it? Self-employed, that's kind of in the same mix, and innovator, that's in this same kind of mix, right? So some people are not necessarily entrepreneurs, but they are self-employed. I guess that makes them an entrepreneur, but they did it maybe for a different reason. They did it not because they wanted to go out and do it, but they couldn't do anything else. They couldn't go to work for the company they wanted to. So they said, there's different, right? So when we talk about this, it's kind of like a big, in my mind, we got a lot of, if we're going to use the data, it's kind of hard because we use these different words in different ways, right? And entrepreneurship is a great thing. It's been a while since I looked to define it specifically. Self-employed, I know all my real estate friends for years. Whether or not they consider themselves entrepreneurs, I don't know, right? And then there are those that are self-employed entrepreneur innovators, right? They run the whole thing.
I believe they're called trailblazers on the last one. Well, and Becca, so back to your marketing people. Is that still the case? Has help resurfaced? Would you call them?
I hired 2 people this week. Hired 2 people this week. One is an intern and is actually one of my daughter's friends from high school. And he is just starting at Indiana University this fall, but he loves business and he's obsessed with it. And he knows way more than I do about all sorts of different topics because it's very much his passion. And so I'm bringing him in to do a major job costing project, going through all of our hours for an entire calendar year and really understanding more of the the real big deep numbers of our business and doing some serious number crunching. I'm really excited. He's really excited. We had lunch Tuesday, we had coffee today. He asked really smart questions. I'm real like I have never been more excited, and I will tell you, I never thought in a million years that a brand new fresh high school graduate would be a right fit for a job costing analysis intern. That's crazy. It is. It's absolutely crazy. But I wanted him to go work at a real estate firm and nobody would get back to me in my network because they weren't ready to hire somebody fresh out of high school, not even a semester of college under his belt. Nobody was willing to take the risk, and I was like, man, this kid's good. I just have this really good feeling that he's going to be great. So he started this week, and then actually my other new hire starts next week, and she's a new grad. She's a new grad with some great experience, hungry to learn. So she has great experience in one aspect of marketing, and really, I think the only reason she came with us is because we're like, oh, you want to learn this? You want to learn this? You want to learn this? And she was like, really? Yeah, yeah. And we're like, okay, yeah. You got 12 teachers on my team. We all love sharing our knowledge with people and helping them learn. So I'm very excited.
Well, and so that
Took long enough.
so you're hiring new talent, fresh talent, and I'm going to parrot somewhat what Dan Wagner said at his sector interview. We were talking about 1031s and DSTs, and he referred to them as the 401k of real estate. So Saul, to your point about the 3 words or more than 3 words, you've got your 1099s, your independents, people on a 1099. You've got your W2s, Darren, those people in that company collecting that big salary and benefits, mind you. And then your K1s, the trailblazers, if they get that far, they get to be lucky enough to collect 3 checks or 4 checks. They own it, they built it, and they rent out a portion of it if possible. And that DST conversation and that 401k just clicked for me. So is that what you're saying? Those are the metrics we're looking for. How many K1 employee? How many K1s? How many W2s? How many independent contractors? That's the new metric. Indexed against the car lot.
We have them in fuzzy metrics right now, right? We almost use them interchangeably sometimes.
Sometimes, well,
which is fine, but for the purpose of if we're going to study this, look at it, right? And you're right. Then there's the tax, the way that you report this revenue that you receive, and that's distinct, right?
Yeah. Well,
and benefits go with that, and
that's exactly right. There's the draw to going with Becca's firm for these 2 employees is coming out of high school. They know it, you saw it, and you hired them. I'm surprised.
One's college.
One's college. Okay. And Darren on the cybersecurity side, and Chris spoke about this. He was at a hiring event for construction. It's not a problem of fresh talent, as I understand it, new talent, high school, college graduate talent. It's, as you pointed out, it's those guys with the experience that are working that salaried position, those W2 cybersecurity specialists that have been doing it a while, that may feel overburdened by what's happening now. Because I assume most companies, when looking at their IT budget, aren't increasing the budget because the threat level is going up, or at least not a correlated increase. Threat level increases by X, let's increase our budget. I assume that the IT budget, like many, and I'm a smaller company, right? The IT budget, time in and time out, people go, why do you spend there? Why do you do this? Well, because you have to, but that's because I've been one of the unfortunate ones in my past. Most companies, they don't want that line item. It's like the office lease. If you're a broker, we don't want to pay for offices. I'm sure Becca, as a brokerage owner, and Saul, your brokerage is probably a PO box if you still have one sitting out there with your license. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, we don't need a PO box in California, so yeah, I still have my license, and I'll keep it forever.
You have to at this point.
There's no reason not to. Right? There's no reason not to, particularly in California, because once you get past age 70 and more than 40 years licensed, you don't have to take continuing education anymore. So I don't have to take the CE. So there's no reason Not to keep renewing that broker's license.
So after 40 years, you figured it out.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't go so far to say that, but that's why I'm still trying.
And I know we're a bit choppy here. It's 20 to the hour. We talked about a few macro things, a few micro things affected the industry. I want to get us back on our normal trend. Big news items. Darren, you pointed out, hit it on the head. IT budgets, IT personnel not available. Anything else major outside of the ransomware, which is an ongoing threat? And I did hear you say, make sure you check those emails that say, "Hey, your password has been breached. Please update it." And in that light, you were saying, make sure you check that it's not a spoof email, right? That nobody has faked that email in to get you to click, because I get those constantly. Anything else on your side of the fence?
Well, I had just mentioned before about the Verizon DBIR report that everybody should read that. I mean, there's 4 key paths that they mention in reference to getting access to your network. Credentials. We talked about credential stuffing and people not changing their passwords, and these data breaches that are used to try your passwords and logins at other websites. Phishing, as you mentioned, is the big thing as well. But ransomware attacks are up 13%. And the big thing today is supply chain breaches. Somebody comes in through one of your vendors, one of your suppliers. It's responsible for 62% of network intrusions today, which is pretty bad. And errors, just human errors, 13% of breaches responsible for that. So, what I mentioned before, just to reiterate it again, is having meetings and bringing in your vendors and those you do business with, and having a more holistic approach to cybersecurity is really, really important.
So on that, the cybersecurity infrastructure supply chain issues, is there a non-hardware solution, or are there more solutions coming online that bypass the need for firewalls, and now it's all on your computer and it can be managed remotely? Is that the trend to reduce some of these costs?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So it's my understanding that a lot of firewalls and different services to protect your business can now be done remotely. It's on the perimeter. It's not a perimeter firewall, an actual device you have to buy with chips, but it's a managed service. Is that something you're seeing an increase in? Companies going out and deploying?
Yeah, there is an increase in people outsourcing a lot of their security alerts, for example, like their security operations center, because it's hard to get people, skilled workforce, and so people are relying more and more on these, entrepreneur companies and other companies who will provide that service for them. But that's not always the best approach either. You've got to look at what's right for your company as well. Are you really the priority, being a small business, or is somebody paying a multi-million-dollar contract a year going to be more of a priority for you when something goes wrong? So that's something to keep in mind as well.
And as far as insurance and who pays for something once it happens, I'm a small business. What happens to me versus a multi-million-dollar company? Where do you draw the line? What should our listeners and those kind of going, wow, what do I do? Where should they look? Do they come look at code detectives? Do they? I know you mentioned the Verizon report, but for the layman out there, what's the easiest path to start kind of finding their way forward here at the second half?
Sure. That people can definitely contact me. I can definitely give them some good advice on this. I as I always mention, it's not all cyber. There's people walking into companies, picking up a box of paper and walking into your loading dock and going into an office and taking information from your network or installing something on a computer. So, the name cyber doesn't always, apply. And then, just think about, it's always important to think about the global issue of malware, for example. So what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of malware that Russia, for example, even developed years ago for use against Ukraine, because this cyber war has been going on for years with Ukraine, right? Black Energy happened quite a few years ago and brought down the power grid for 700,000 people in Ukraine long before there was kinetic warfare. And so this type of malware keeps going around the internet and around the globe, and companies are being hit by this politically motivated and developed malware. It comes around and it hits companies and energy companies here, you know, a year later, a couple of years later. And this is one of the things that I thought was really fascinating that this representative from Verizon mentioned one time is he said a lot of people don't think about malware that way, that malware that was developed years ago, it's still out there on the web, it's still out there in the wild, and people are being affected by it. And it's not, it didn't just hit a few companies and went away. People haven't patched everything, and patching is really, really key, and it's not done as much as you might think. The other thing as well is, I would say when you think about bringing in consultants to your company, and this is something that came up in a conversation yesterday at this conference, people create these credentials for consultants, and they give them the keys of the kingdom very often, especially if you're in cybersecurity. You're going to have access to a lot of sensitive information. And rescinding that access after they've left and they've completed that consulting doesn't happen as often as you would hope it would happen. And these people are out there who've come in and done consulting for your company, who have access to your network and sensitive information years and years later. So that's something to think about. You need people to do auditing on these things.
So auditing and don't forget the basics. In effect, audit your systems. I know we did. I think it was January last year. We did a rewrite your how to do business manual, and especially now with Ukraine and cybersecurity, malware, and the increase in attacks. Audit your people and audit your business, credentials, passwords, and how you're handling things. And I know we're choppy here, and I hope I still sound good. My speakers are
Sound
going
good.
around perfect. Yeah. And Becca, on your side, you're coming back from ICSC. Last month we spoke. We spoke about your different investors, and you had a few people raising funds to deploy those funds. You've heard Darren speak on the fact that once they're in there, those offices, these plans are all at risk. Let's pause that for a second. Did you raise, or are those funds being deployed?
Funds are being raised and deployed. Everything's going according to plan. Actually, things are going very well. I'm very surprised at how quickly one of my clients saw a lot of opportunity in the market and raised a 2-year fund. They typically would do a 3 to 5 year fund. They raised a 2-year fund. It's over. I think it's half deployed already, and it launched in January. So it's about twice as fast as they thought it was going to be, which was definitely a surprise. But they're finding good opportunities, and that's one thing about real estate, is that uncertainty brings opportunity, no matter what. And I think that's probably true in all economic sectors and market sectors, that uncertainty does bring opportunity. You have to be looking for it, and you have to not be, penny and the sky is falling and hiding from everything. You have to be out there looking and finding those opportunities and clinging to them. And that's very much what we're still seeing. And it's really fun to watch. It's really, really fun to watch. And I actually have been talking to some other clients that we just finished a couple of more pitch decks for clients who are raising significant capital. Like at first they thought they were going to syndicate and just do one deal. And then they're like, okay, we'll do a series and do 2. And then they're like, screw it. We're raising a fund. We got like 6 deals in the pipeline that are ready to go. We got to move. Those sorts of things are so exciting. And because they're in like TIF district and opportunity zones, and Saul will recognize very quickly that smart investors who are taking advantage of money, taking advantage of government opportunities.
Yeah. Government can't do it by themselves. It takes the private sector, and now the money's there from the government, and the government, has policies that it's going to implement. They do it all the time. Every time we fill out a tax return, if we itemize or we own property, we're taking advantage of what the government offers because we want to do what the government wants us to do. And the government wants certain things to happen in real estate. And people who are in real estate who look at this, they'll see the opportunity. It's there. And that's great, Beck. It's good to hear people are actually getting involved and taking advantage of what's there.
Hey, one thing I was going to add to that, Saul, I don't know if you've heard of I bonds. These are these government treasuries.
Yes. Yeah,
Paying
8%, 9% or whatever.
9.3% now. Your money is safe unless something happens with the U.S. government. 9.3%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought there must be some limitation on how much you can buy, but that just shocked me when I saw that, right? I'm thinking
10,000 a year, but it's a good place to put it.
Yeah, for sure.
Not in Bitcoin, but we're not going to go down that route because we don't have enough time at the moment.
NFTs, right?
NFTs, yeah, and the different scandals that go. Saul, speaking of government programs and subsidies, there was something that caught my attention just this morning. They were talking, everybody's been talking about the metaverse and what you can or can't buy. As I understand it, real estate's been purchased, volumes have fallen out. The acquisition of the assets that were acquired are worthless. And now they're talking about lending in the space. And you're following ICE and all the other macroeconomics here. What, if anything, has come up since we spoke last month briefly on it in your mind for this virtual real estate? Are they going the way of NFTs? Let's just not even go there. Let's focus on space.
Yeah, I think right now everything is on hold. And so I'd be real careful about looking at the whole concept of virtual real estate still for this old baby boomer. And I'm pretty open-minded about things. But let's say somebody does have a metaverse and then somebody creates their own. What's to stop somebody else from creating their own closed network and somebody else from creating their own closed network and somebody else from creating it, right? And as long as they're not interoperable, which is the circumstance right now with, you can't take your Facebook friends and take them over to Twitter, as long as they're right, then it might be worth something as long as there's only one. But what happens if there's another place? So I don't know enough about it, and I'm an old real estate broker, and I would take the opportunity if I thought it was worth the risk. And at this point, for me, the most important thing is to spend some time to learn about this, because there is application, there is benefit as to whether or not there's going to be you're going to be able to make tens of millions of dollars buying virtual high-rise buildings in somebody's metaverse. I'm not sure of that yet.
Well, the other thing is as well, there's been a huge uptick in hackers looking to hack into crypto wallets, and I could see there could be a similar trend with metaverse and NFTs as well, right?
Yeah. So, and you hit on it, so you said interoperability. So the more interoperability that exists, as I understand it, the more vulnerability can occur. More things that can get lost, more passwords, unless you're using the right software, true software Darren, to your point, depending on vendors, right? Go ahead, Saul.
Well, I was saying that, and that's kind of the part of the appeal of blockchain, isn't it? Yeah. Is you make things interoperable because they need to be, because if you don't, you got walled gardens. And while there's benefits there, if you can create interoperable systems with security, that's ideal, because you got these big monopolies. I'm on Facebook and I got 5,000 people and I want to move them over to some new platform. I can't do it. I can't take them. I got to start all over again. If I got 30,000 followers on LinkedIn, I can't move them over they're not interoperable. And so when you hear about these big companies and litigation and potential outcomes of violations of antitrust of these big social media platforms, one of the solutions that you hear people talk about is forcing them to be interoperable. And somebody the other day likened it to, there was a time when you couldn't take your phone number with you when you went from one carrier to another. You had to, right? So that kind of kept you with that carrier. And then they came up with Congress passed something, the portability of your phone number. And so I think all this bears, future study, and it's all going to take place. It's the right track. But, I'd jump on Darren's bandwagon and say, you just got to be careful,
Go ahead.
Can I jump in here? Because I think one of the small print items with social media platforms in particular is that they own your data. It's theirs, not yours. It's very much like the MLSs and the Realtor.com issues of us giving people data and then they sell it back to us. It's the same thing. We don't own our contacts on those platforms.
And so, this is interesting, because the other day I was reading something, and so I was very active in Web 1 or Internet 1.0. And so there's a sequence here to follow. It's pretty interesting. Internet 1.0, or then the browser came, Web 1.0. What was it based upon? It was based upon it was read only. because you really had to be a programmer to interact. Right? So it was read only. The tech stack was like HTML, HTTP, and DNS. And then, so that was Web 1. And right, you had websites and you had email pretty much, and that was what you had. And then you had Web 2, and that's when this new stack of technology, right? They called it the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and Python Perl, right? So you created this new tech stack. And what did this allow? This allowed people to engage one another. And now you didn't have to be a programmer, which you did in Web 1. And then you had the new platforms sprang up like Twitter and Facebook. But you're right, Becca, they own that content. You don't own that. That's the thing. If it's interoperable, you can, but they own that content. So you hear people talking about Web 3. And in my mind, you can't really understand Web 3 unless you went through what we just went through, right? And so there was a product, Web 2.0. What was the product? Social media and blogging. And then Web 3, that's kind of where we're headed. And people say we're really at Web 2.5, which is where you can start to own your content, because Web 2, the platform was king. And then this idea of Web 3 is more blockchain, more closed, right? And that's where people are looking at easier compliance with the new privacy laws and more security. And that's this thing called Web 3. But the first person I was listening to said, well, we're really at Web 2.5. Because what we've got is we've got people owning content. And he even said that at some point here and they might already be doing it, Facebook's going to start paying people for their content. And so that's the first step, right? In moving towards the platforms, they see the inevitability of the next phase. And what's the underlying technology of Web 3, where Web 2 was the LAMP stack and Web 1 was Web 3, the underlying technology, I think, is blockchain. And on that, you're going to build all kinds of other things, and they'll run into problems. And that's where we get into this crypto conversation, which is, to me, it's like a payment system, but it's where everything's going. It's the next step.
Well, and so Becca hit on it, the MLS, other data providers, Web3 is coming. What should we as real estate professionals, young, old, middle, small, big, doesn't matter what size business you are, what could you be doing or what should you be thinking about as you go forward? Becca, I know you said you have your investors all subscribed, overfunded deals, and they're deploying. Are they shifting how they look at their data a bit? Are they trying to keep more closer to the vest? And then the same token, Saul, with the MLSs, are they going to pay us after Facebook as brokers for putting that data in? If Facebook starts to pay me as a consumer, I mean, the MLS is going to pay me as a broker, I would hope.
Well, they made me king,
And then, Darren, does any of this not make sense? Because you're there to fact check us on all of the tech and cyber side. At this point,
makes sense to me. Yeah.
Well, I love it. Although off to a rocky start, like Web 1.0, then 2.0, we seem to come back together here on this call, at least from my headset. As far as part 3 of the show, every month we talk about how to reach us and why to reach us. So if we could, let's go around quickly. Saul, why and how? Data advocate, where are we and why should they reach out?
Yeah, so you can reach out to the Data Advocate, THEDataadvocate.com. And all of this conversation about data, about privacy, about security, about the future of real estate, and what's happening with the major purchases of something like Black Knight by ICE, just about anything you'd like to know about real estate and technology in the world of data. We try to, there's a lot to keep up with. We do our best to keep up. So if you can't keep up on your own, that's a reason to come to the Data Advocate, because we try to curate content, look at content, write content, so that you don't have to run all around to try to find what you need to know to be able to move the next step in your business.
Love it. And then Becca, reaching out to Carlson Integrated, what's what for the next 30 days? How do they reach you and why should they reach out?
So Becca Carlson Integrated, we're a small marketing consulting company. We work with clients all over the country to help them define their messaging and then to share their messaging throughout whichever marketing channels that they are engaged in. My office number, 224-338-9855. And I'm also available if people just have questions about marketing. I spend a good deal of my time just trying to help people through what they're facing in their challenges in their businesses. I don't know everything, but I'm always willing to lend an ear and see what I can do to help. So thank you.
Love it. And Professor Hayes, and now editor at the Cybersecurity. You have to run me through the title. I don't have it here, but why should they reach out, and how do they reach out to connect with you?
Sure. So people can send me an email, dhayes@pace.edu or hayes@codetectives.com. And basically, I work on a lot of different investigations, a lot of civil litigation, for example. Sometimes it's a case of an employee moves to another company, maybe a senior executive, takes clients, takes intellectual property. What exactly happened? Companies will bring me in. Sometimes it's on the incident response side. So I work on a lot of data breaches and that kind of thing. And I can also consult on cybersecurity issues. So being in the trenches, working on these investigations, I know a lot about what companies could have done better to protect their systems, who they need to be in contact with in case a breach occurs, and what should they do. And also red team testing, how to run different exercises, kind of military drills on how to bolster your cyber defenses.
And that's companies of all sizes and in all stages of life. It's better to be preventative than try and repair, based on everything that was said today. And with that, we're at the top of the hour. As far as Mr. Mendoza, are you still with us? We'll roll us out. I want to thank our listeners for putting up with the microphone issues. All our technical issues are only related to microphone headsets. Here at CRECo.ai, I do want to highlight that. And I do want to thank you guys for listening, attending, registering, pre-registering. The show continues to grow, and we can't do it without you. Please download our show anywhere you get your audio, Apple Podcast, Alexa, Google Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a host of great content, including sector interviews, past shows, and most importantly, or not most importantly, but just as important, two of our guests that weren't here today that couldn't make it, Anna Maria Kowalik from Inland Green and Chris Abel from Connecticut Associated Builders and Contractors. Looking forward to having you on next month's show. We're sending everybody microphones and headsets, so we'll all have the same issues or no issues. And please, to our listeners and viewers, please do share, rate, and review us. It really does help. Thank you again for tuning in for this month's Roundtable, powered by CRECo.ai. Mr. Mendoza.